Hey everyone, DisturbedShadow here, bringing you the next album in the In Flames discography. Today we'll be talking about their 2004 effort entitled Soundtrack to Your Escape, which came out 10 years ago yesterday. I meant to do this video yesterday, but I was busy, so you're gonna get it today. Anyway, this album is infamous for being one of the most hated In Flames albums. And one of the main complaints of that was sort of, again, going from where they went with Root to Remain, continuing that direction, but all the complaints were that it was too synthy or that the riffs were too generic, stuff like that. But anyway, I had heard a couple songs off this album before going into it, but I haven't actually listened to the whole thing before. And going into this, I kind of went in blind. I wanted to go in optimistically because I like to give things a chance before judging them. But I can sort of see where a lot of the complaints were coming from on this one. But it's not a bad album. It's just not their best album. So let's just jump right in and talk about some of the highlights from this album. First, I want to talk about the opening track called "Friend" with the R in apostrophes. I mean, in parentheses, not apostrophes. Anyway, going to the song, there wasn't any like keyboards or anything in the song, so I was a little confused about why people were complaining about this album being too synthy, which because there's like no synthesizer or anything in the song. It's just a pretty straightforward, simplistic song with sort of simplistic riffing, but the it's all scream vocals, but it's pretty good what Anders is doing on vocals here. But for the most part, the song is just kind of the riffing and guitar work is sort of generic on this song, but I really like the vocal approach on this song, so it was a good one. The next song I want to talk about is the first song she heard this album, which is the lead off single from it, I believe, called "The Quiet Place." This is actually probably the best song on the album. It's got a lot more going on than a lot of the other tracks on the album do. Like, there's some cool stuff happening. There's a really cool melodic guitar riff, sort of blended together with some cool keyboard stuff that gives this not a lot of layers and gives the song a lot of depth. Plus, Andrews is doing all sorts of different things on this album, vocal wise. Like, he's ranging from more screaming, high range, low range screaming, plus some more like sort of almost spoken stuff, plus some more melodic type singing, and it sort of all blends together really well. I just really like the way this song comes out, and it's definitely my favorite song on the album. And the album sort of gets in the part in the middle where it's just kind of boring almost. Like, I tried not to, and I really tried to like this album, but I honestly found myself falling asleep during this album, which is surprising to me because I usually really like what In Flames is doing and what their music sounds like, but it was just boring to me. Like, a lot of it started to sound the same throughout the song. Like, I had trouble differentiating between songs. Like, going back, it's just not a memorable album to me, besides a few tracks. The next song I want to talk about, which is about halfway through the album, is the next song that actually sticks out again after a sort of bland middle section, which is another song that it's another live staple besides A Quiet Place, entitled "My Sweet Shadow," which I really like this song because it's got this really cool melodic part like on guitars, and then Anders does this like spoken word part in the verses, and then goes into more heavy singing, which sort of becomes a more melodic, catchy chorus type thing, which I really like the way it progresses. And then at the end, it sort of does a reprisal of the opening riff. Plus, it has this cool layer of synths in it. It just the way it all comes together sounds really cool. It's a really good song, and it's another standout on a very lackluster album in my opinion. There's a couple more songs I want to talk about, which are called "Evil in a Closet" and "Borders and Shading." What I really like on this song is that there's a really cool backing vocal thing happening where it's like a bunch of layered vocal tracks doing backing vocals, and it sounds really cool. Plus, Anders has these really, like, I don't know, melodic sounding choruses. But, I mean, for the most part, the songs just sort of all blended together. I mean, there's nothing really that stuck out besides the few tracks that I mentioned. So let's just go in and talk about the sound of the band. The guitar work is just boring. There's not a lot. There's not even very many solos or anything like that. It's just kind of blah. And the riffs all sort of sound similar. So there's not a lot of unique stuff happening. It's sort of, again, this is primarily what put me to sleep. But the tuning on the guitar is really good, and the production is better, and it's a little less muddier than it was on Root to Remain. So, good work with the sound quality, but Bjorn and Jesper were not really doing very many interesting riffs besides a couple songs like The Quiet Place and My Sweet Shadow where they actually shine a little bit, but for the most part, it's just kind of boring in my opinion. Then Daniel on drums. Again, the drums are very good. It's a little more pulled back than the one Root to Remain, where he was sort of going crazy and doing all these cool fills and really cool different stuff. He's pulled back a little bit, but still doing a really good job and keeping interesting fills happening there. But it's a little less crazy than it was on Root to Remain. Another plus is that, like I mentioned on Root to Remain, the drums were very loud in the mix and sort of tended to overpower anything else that was happening, but they sort of got the level on the drums better, so it's not overpowering, which is a plus. I'm talking about Peter on bass. There's not a lot of standout bass parts on this song, on this album, besides a few places, like in The Quiet Place and a couple of other songs. There's some bass that's doing something different. For the most part, I had trouble hearing the bass at a lot of points too. It wasn't turned up as loud as it was on previous albums, so like I mentioned on pretty much every review, I really like when the bass is turned up loud so I can hear it, but there just wasn't enough. It wasn't loud enough that I really had trouble hearing it. Plus, it wasn't doing a lot of interesting things either, but it is what it is. And let's talk about Anders on vocals. Vocal-wise, he's doing a lot more different styles of vocals. There's more spoken word parts, more sort of singing parts, more of this kind of shouting part, singing, shouting combination type thing. And there's high screams and low screams, and all these things are combined and layered in different ways, which sort of come together to make pretty interesting sounding vocal approaches. The vocals are definitely the best part of the album when everything else is sort of bland, in my opinion. One thing I did notice on the vocal approach in here is as compared to Root to Remain, is that on Root to Remain they sort of went for the sort of catchy choruses, but they didn't really do that as much on this album, so it's a little bit of a different approach. A lot of people complained on Root to Remain that the vocal approach was sort of going for like the more catchy chorus style, but they don't really do that as much on this album, which is sort of an interesting thing, since they were trying to be more of a mainstream push, but they sort of changed their approach to doing that away on this album. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say on this album. Like I said many times, there's just not a lot that really stands out to me on this album, so all in all, it's a pretty boring album. But it's still a lot better than a lot of the other stuff out there. So I give it a pretty average rating. Overall, I think I would give it about a 6 or a 6.5 or something like that. It just doesn't have the same quality that In Flames is known for, so it's just not their best album. It's not anywhere near their best album, but it's still a decent listen. But if you're going to get into In Flames, I'd check out any of their other albums first. So that's it for the review, and I will see you guys in the next video.